This is Tizelle Ramos, your host for the Oracle Academy Virtual Student Day. I hope you're enjoying the presentation. The next one will be presented by Ram.
Greetings, my friends. Welcome to this segment. My name is Ramakrishnan K, and I'm a director in the Solution Engineering Group in Oracle India. I'm based out of the financial capital of India called Mumbai. And I work for a lot of BFSI customers in India. What we are going to do today is spend a little time and understand the concept of API and what do you mean or what do we mean by the API economy. You would also understand why it is important to understand and appreciate the API economy in today's world, right? And then we'll see how we can use it when we talk to our customers and when we have engagements and interactions in the industry. Let's start with why APIs matter. No mistaking that we live in a digital world, and with digital transformation, customers have demands for connectivity and innovative services. And because the consumer is the king, they expect more. They have options in this rapidly changing marketplace. So you and I need to respond quickly. This is really exciting times because we can deliver more. We as consumers expect information to be available practically instantaneously. But how does that really happen? One of the most popular ways of communicating digital information is via APIs or the application programming interfaces. Some of the apps that are widely used you may see here. Your favorite social platform, one of my favorite traffic apps, which is Google Maps, or even more commoditized applications like the weather. They all use APIs. If any one of you have used Mint, which is a financial service, it actually talks to your credit card company via an API, to your bank via an API, to your student loan servicer via an API, and provides a consolidated place for you to see your financial picture. Basically, it gets all these details and shows to you in the form of a dashboard. And that's really the point that we want to drive home. Information is being traded constantly, and as such, APIs are the new norms. An example always helps. Let's look at an example to understand this a bit better. Now, most of us would have traveled by flight and for sure have many travels coming up ahead in our life. While for the airline company, it's just moving you from one airport to the other. As travelers, we start our travel much before we get into the flight. An Uber to the airport for catching our flight, and then some kind of local travel to reach the destination from the airport we land in. Airline companies are transforming themselves to help travelers to reach their destination and not just take flights. So they are extending their platform to help travelers to schedule a cab which could pick them up from their home, take them to the airport, and then again from the airport, take them to their actual destination. And with this, they can easily manage the car pickup timing if there is a flight delay. Simple things, but big impact. Now, how do they do it? Here, the airline and the cab service companies exposes APIs and exchange information in a real-time basis. What's the big benefit? The benefit for a cab service like Uber is they essentially have more exposure, which obviously would mean more customers and, without saying, more revenue. For the airline, this is an excellent new feature in their mobile app. So the adoption of the app itself increases, customers are more happy, and there could be a chance that they could share the revenue with Uber, or rather Uber shares their revenue with the airline. But the key point is customers don't just see you as an airline company. They see you as someone who would help them to travel from one location to the other. Is the market demand for API real, or is it just a figment of our imagination? As you would know, none of these presentations are complete without statistics, and here is mine. Forrester estimates that API management market is going to be about over 1 billion by 2020. IDC says that about 50% of spending and over 100% of the IT growth would be driven by third-party platforms. To give you an analogy, this would mean that the number of car bookings or the number of car booking requests to the cab company would come from the airline apps or sites. And this is not through the cab booking mobile app, right? It's a totally new channel for their business. Last but not the least, 25% of market leaders will lose their number one spot to a company founded after the year 2000 because of their ability to use digital technologies such as mobile apps more intuitively. What does that mean? That means that if you don't have an enterprise which is ready to expose your capabilities as API to the outside world, you essentially are going to be part of that 25%. With statistics taken care of, definitions are next. So what exactly is an API? An API is located at a particular endpoint. What is an endpoint? It's a point that marks the end of an array, line segment, or interval. Pretty straightforward. An API is used to access a service. What's a service? It's the action of helping or doing work for someone. An API enforces a defined interface to a service. We know what a service is. What is an interface? It's a point where two systems meet and interact. And if we put these three key characters together, we get the complete definition. An API is an interface to a service at an endpoint. In plain simple words, API or APIs are the doors of the digital world. Extending the analogy to the door, let us try to compare an API to a real-world door. An API is located at a particular end. A door is located at a particular address. Exactly the same. An API is used to control access to a service. A door is used to control access to an area, maybe to a room or to a house or maybe to an apartment. An API enforces a defined interface to a service. A door enforces a defined interface to an area. So if you look at it, a door, which is something that you see in the physical world, is precisely doing what an API would do in the technological world. Now that we understand what an API is and how it is typically being used. Let us get a little more deeper and understand what are the key building blocks of an API. So if you look at it, APIs enable the exchange of data services, and it is essentially a trade between organizations. In many cases, it is B2B, and it is primarily done for uh, to allow for economic specialization. But if you look at it, it can easily be extended to include B2C and even governments. So to give you an example of B2C, what could potentially happen is if you're a bank and if you publish forex exchange rate on a daily basis, you could actually have an API which exposes the forex rate, and they could be consumed by anyone. They could be consumed by other banks. They could be consumed by other currency market companies, okay, or they could be consumed by a developer who actually has his or her app hosted on Google Play or the Apple App Store. They can pretty much use your Forex API and create a calculator and show the conversion wherein people can put in the source currency, and they'll get the currency to which they want to convert to. So the main idea is to source capabilities that are not strategic to you from other vendors and to focus on your company's core differentiators. This is why APIs matter and why they are a part of business and not just technological approaches. Next, there are a few key aspects to consider in an API ecosystem. The first and the foremost is entrance. Where do users enter your API or your API world? So if you look at common companies, so if you look at one of the popular ones like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, right? Each of them have a developer website. So they have a developer.twitter.com, which is very different than the normal Twitter website. Similarly, Facebook has something called as developer.facebook.com. Instagram as www.instagram.com/developer. You should actually go to these websites and see how different is it than the typical apps that they have or the websites that they have that you normally use. So these are those websites which essentially give you details, right, on how to enter into their ecosystem using the APIs. So once you have people entering, it's very important that you secure these gateways. One of the key things that you take care of is the key enforcement part. So who essentially gets access to your API is a moot question. So in the airline company and cab service example, they actually can have an exclusivity pact wherein they can say that allow only those airlines which are listed part of the star lines to actually to allow to book cabs. So this is an exclusive arrangement between Star Alliance, the airlines belonging to Star Alliance, and the cab service company. And that's again a very enticing offering given by the alliance to their customers, which becomes a differentiator. Some companies may actually give free access to their APIs without any pact, but what they still do is they say that we'll still insist on a unique key so that we precisely know who accesses the API and it never gets misused. Is authorization, which essentially means that who issues the entitlement, correct? So in our example, you can have a case wherein the cab company is issuing the entitlement for the airline company to use these services, right? And what kind of entitlement? You could actually book a cab or check the forex rate or do a forex transaction, or you could check traffic as compared to someone with a different entitlement can just view if cabs are available or just check the forex rates and just can't do a transaction. So those kind of differentiations can pretty easily be built in the platform. You then have the authentication part, essentially talking of the identity piece. So are you going to have people who are going to consume the API with a username and password so that they can access the API? Or are you going to go more open, wherein you say that anyone and everyone who has an OAuth ID, right, can probably use my APIs? So again here, if you go and see the examples that we spoke of, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, just go and see what kind of authentication they allow you to use. Is threat protection. While you're giving access to people, what is it that you want to ensure so that robbers and intruders are kept out? Right? So you need to think about that and ensure that they don't get into your systems via the API. The other key thing is so while you keep the unwanted entities out of your system, you also want to make it very easy for the right people to enroll and access the API. Just for an experience, try registering for API access with Facebook or Twitter and Instagram and check out which one is more intuitive and easy. Then comes monitoring. So whatever goes underneath, whatever is the usage has to be tracked. So all requests gets tracked by the platform, so you precisely know who is using what and when, who are seeing errors, what are the response time on each of those APIs. So basis these, you can take decisions. You can say that, hey, that the API that I've given to this specific vendor, wherein I'm not, who's kind of using it for free, as compared to say vendor 2 who's paying me, I can go and limit or rather apply a rate limit to the vendor who is kind of using it free. Okay, or I can probably increase or reduce checks basis the pattern of usage that I see. All these things cannot be done unless and you monitor what's exactly going on. You then decide what do you want to do or how open do you want to keep your API. Do you want everyone and anyone to access it, or do you want to keep it more exclusive? Do you want to ensure that only some people have access to it? So we generally see enterprises who do a combination of both. There are some services which they say that is publicly available, anyone and everyone can use it till they have the key authorized and authenticated, right? And then they have a bunch of APIs which they say that, hey, for these we will probably bill you and charge you, or you'll have to pay an amount for us. That's a decision that can be taken basis your business priorities. You then have restricted zones. So there are certain capabilities which are reserved for just the users. These could be admin areas which have access only to certain people, and they could do the overall managing and monitoring of the APIs and the platform that is available. The other key thing is how well are your APIs organized. Again, the best way to know how it is typically done is to go to the the example sites that I gave you, and check how easy is it for you to find an API to do a typical activity that you would have done on those websites. So if you tweets, just find out from the Twitter website um, the API which would help you to send a tweet from your application and not use the Twitter application. These are pretty very well documented, and you'll be amazed with the ease with which you could do some of these. The other important thing is user experience. Whatever you do here, unless the platform gives you a fantastic user experience, it's of no use, both for internal users and for external users. And it's very important to understand that it has to be intuitive for internal users also, because only when it is intuitive for the internal users, they would make it intuitive for the external users. They would actually mirror the same experience that they face with the platform to the outside world. Last, not the least, is the addressability. How easy is it for people to find where your APIs are, right? Now, these are things that you learn over a period of time, and you understand that even by naming the APIs, rightly naming it, ensuring that there is a hierarchy created, you can ensure that the overall addressability increases when it comes to APIs. The other key important part is the API lifecycle. If you look at it, it's not a case of you creating an API once and then just forgetting it. That's never ever going to happen. It always starts from idea, and it's not that a single individual does it. So if you look at it, there are multiple people involved, which is why you see different personas appearing in the slide here. So an idea is actually a collective effort. So you have most of the persona participating it, and then the idea goes through design. Now in the API world, you can actually do some amount of mock testing right at design. The moment you start doing that, the biggest benefit that you have is some of these ideas gets tested very early. So you don't really hit a problem after you publish, which is way ahead in the life cycle. You pretty much take care of those errors, conditions early in design. Once you do that, you then go ahead and implement it. While you implement it, you do the interface testing, and you can do a little bit of functional testing also over there, right? Once you implement, this is done by a different persona, you go and then deploy it. So when an API gets deployed, it is kind of pushed to the server where it would be kind of hosted and be available for the outside world to be used. Obviously, it would not be available as is unless you give the grants and you publish it to the outside world saying that, hey, this is available. Now, once you publish it to the outside available, the application developers can actually come and consume the APIs. And as they consume, their consumption results in creating those trails, which results in analytics. So you would know who's using, what kind of APIs, what's the response time, what are the error rates, how is the whole platform performing, which are the popular APIs, so on and so forth. And basis that, you manage to feed in that input to the ideas, and the cycle continues. So if you look at it, it's not just a start and stop kind of thing. It's more iterative, and you can actually do an iteration at individual levels with multiple personas involved. And if you look at the traditional API lifecycle, right, it jumps directly from implementation. That's very different than what a typical new age API lifecycle is like. So what does API allow you to do? It basically abstracts the core system capability from user experience. It controls access to your service and resources. It controls usage of external services. And it allows you to know what's happening. That's kind of a good summary of what I had to tell you today. Thank you, friends. Thank you very much for your time. I hope the session was helpful to you. My contact details were in slide 1. Do reach out to me if you have any questions, queries, thoughts on the subject. Thank you very much for your time and best wishes. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. So for the participants, I hope that you enjoy this presentation. We do have a few more. There are some career presentations as well as more technology presentations. So please feel free to continue to join us. Thank you.